Hello everyone, my name is Rob Rogema and I'm a distinguished professor in regenerative culture at the Tecnológico de Monterrey. And I will now show some examples of nature and landscape-driven urbanism. As we've seen before, ecocathedric regions need to develop in three different dimensions. It needs to take into account the time limits and the time horizons, not looking only at the short term, but also at the long term. It needs to take into account the space, not only the local space, but also the global space around us. And it needs to take into account different ways of decision making, involving and including what nature would like to do for the future. So this ecocathedric region sees nature as a designer, a conductor, and a decision maker at the same time. This is an example in the northern part of the Netherlands, which takes into account the time horizon of 100 years, a nature and landscape-driven plan for the long term. In this case, we had a lot of space to grow all the food for all the people in that area, but we discovered that there is not enough water for growing all those crops. But we have a very good system here. The sea is very nearby, so we plan to connect the sea or reconnect the sea with the city again. Nowadays, this is disconnected. So human beings closed off the sea from where they live out of safety reasons. But what happens if we start reconnecting the sea with the city? We can reconnect water and land. And because of that, sediments will enter the landscape and slowly the land will start rising. And this brings about a much more safer situation than we have at the moment. Over time, this is changing and occupying more space in the landscape. Reconnecting water and land also means that there will emerge new forms of very profitable agriculture. Agriculture that is based on the saline circumstances that are brought into the landscape. Lobster farming, oyster farming, and the like are much more profitable than potato farming and sugar beets. And reconnecting the water and the land also implies that an ecological succession will happen. Biodiversity is increased because of this succession, from saltwater conditions via brackish conditions to freshwater conditions. In the end, this plan will transform the landscape to something that we actually cannot really predict because the landscape will form it by itself. So the drawing is just a view that could be possible, but the actual situation in 2121 will be completely different. A second plan I want to discuss here is the development of a green metropolis for Monterrey in Mexico. This is a spatial strategy for regenerating the urban landscape in a dry condition. The green metropolis of Monterrey means that we need to look at the landscape and include the landscape and the environment in our urban transformation. The plan in 1967 shows us a very high similarity with the finger plan of Copenhagen 2 decades before. Green spaces that are entering the urban shape very, very deep. But if we look at it nowadays, the city of Monterrey has almost closed off itself from its environment. Green spaces are hardly entering the urban contours. While in Copenhagen, the plan that they had in 1947 still exists. Large green spaces are entering deeply into the city. So how can we redo this? How can we transform the city of Monterrey towards a nature-driven metropolis based on the watersheds in the city and taking the water system that is here, although not always visible, as the basis for our planning? That starts with uncovering the urban creeks that are in some cases not even visible, dried out or just covered by roads and other things. Once we know where the urban creeks actually are, we can propose to connect them through ecological corridors with each other. And a framework, a green framework in the urban context emerges. And then the last step in this process is to embed the urban parts into this green-blue framework. And that doesn't happen overnight. So we need to start changing and transforming the urban metropolis through different concrete processes and projects. Urban farming is one way of greening the city and connecting the landscape again with the city. These are the initiatives that are currently underway in the metropolis of the city. And we would need to reinvent the old recipes and the old ways of preparing food in order to grow the ingredients in the city and green the metropolis as a whole. And the other idea, to create a city that is green, that doesn't happen overnight because you need to start planting trees and creating nature all around the city. So if we ask people to compensate for their carbon footprint by providing the trees and have them planted in the city, we can start a movement that is changing the look and the feel, but also the climate of the entire metropolis. It means that each person would plant 500 to 1,500 trees per year. In this way, we can start collaborating with municipalities in the entire metropolis to help with the planting and compensating for the carbon offset of the entire metropolis. So these were two of the very interesting examples of how you can plan in a nature and landscape-driven way. Thank you.